In 2014, a janitor named Ronald Reed died in Brattleboro, Vermont. He drove a second-hand Toyota. He fixed his coat with safety pins. His estate was worth $8 million. In blue-chip stocks, nobody knew. The same year, Richard Foscone, former Merrill Lynch executive, Harvard MBA, Nantucket estate, filed for bankruptcy. He earned 50 times more than Reed. He ended up with less. Same economy, same decades, different outcomes. The variable wasn't income, it was behavior. Reed is the exception they write about. But the math that made him isn't exceptional. It's available to anyone with a paycheck and patience. Harvard's Grant study tracked over 1,000 people for 75 years, the longest study of human development ever conducted. The wealth findings are buried on page 214. Nobody quotes them. Intelligence predicted career. Discipline predicted wealth. Different variables. Most people optimize for the wrong one. 5 behaviors separated the 10% from everyone else. Not secrets, not strategies, behaviors. And the most dangerous one is the one you'll insist doesn't apply to you. The Federal Reserve's survey of consumer finances tells a story nobody wants to hear. Households earning $75,000 had the same savings rate as households earning $40,000 a decade earlier. Incomes rose 87%. Savings didn't move, not 1%. Economists call it the Duesenberry effect. Your spending doesn't track your income. It tracks your neighbor's spending. You're not budgeting against your paycheck. You're budgeting against your zip code. A $15,000 raise. After taxes in the 22% bracket, that's $11,700. Most people upgrade their car payment by $350 a month. That's $4,200 a year. More than a third of the raise gone before they buy a single coffee. My grandfather called this spending tomorrow's capital on today's comfort. He drove the same Mercedes for 17 years, not because he couldn't afford a new one. Because the car still worked. That distinction, can I afford it versus does it serve me, is where wealth begins. Hedonic adaptation guarantees it. The new apartment feels special for 90 days. Then it's just where you live. But the $800 monthly rent increase compounds against you for 40 years. The pleasure fades. The cost doesn't. Remember that asymmetry. It returns. That $800 a month, invested instead at 8% for 20 years, becomes $470,000. That's the apartment upgrade you never noticed after 90 days. $17.4 trillion sitting in U.S. savings accounts right now. The average yield, 0.46%. Inflation, 3.2%. That money isn't being saved, it's being eroded every year, silently. At 3.2% inflation, $50,000 in a savings account loses almost 25% of its purchasing power in a decade. You kept the number. You lost the value. $50,000 in a savings account for 20 years at 0.46% becomes $54,800. That's 20 years of patience for $4,800. The same $50,000 in a total market index fund at the historical 10% average? $349,000. Same money, same time, different vehicle. That's the historical average. It includes years the market fell 40%. .com 2008, March 2020. You have to stay seated through all of them. The difference isn't returns. It's nearly $300,000 of purchasing power you surrendered to fear. It's not ignorance. It's loss aversion. Kahneman and Tversky proved in 1979 that losing $100 feels roughly twice as painful as gaining $100. Your brain is wired to protect capital, not deploy it. Evolution made you a saver. Mathematics demands you be an investor. There's that asymmetry again. The pain of a market drop lasts weeks. The cost of not investing lasts decades. Ronald Reed solved this mechanically. 20% of every paycheck into dividend-paying equities. Before he paid a single bill. Not after. Before. He didn't call it investing. He called it the first bill. Capital deployment is a non-negotiable expense. Saving is defense. Investing is offense. A team that only defends never scores. And this game has a clock. It's called your lifespan. Total U.S. household debt hit $17.5 trillion in Q3 2024, according to the New York Federal Reserve. The median credit card balance, $6,500. At 20% APR, making only the minimum payment, typically 2% of your balance, that $6,500 takes over 50 years to pay off. You pay $34,000 on a $6,500 balance, 5 times the original debt. That's not borrowing, that's a subscription to poverty. Minimum payments aren't accidents. Credit card companies engineer them at the threshold where you feel progress but your principal barely moves. They've optimized the payment structure the way a casino optimizes slot machine near misses. You keep pulling the lever. The wealthy don't avoid debt, they architect it. A mortgage below the expected return on the property is a leverage instrument. That's debt working for you. A car loan at 8.9% on a depreciating asset is a wealth transfer from your future self to a dealership. Same word, different engineering. If you carry multiple debts, the math is settled. Pay minimums on everything. Throw every extra dollar at the highest interest rate first. On typical multi-debt portfolios, the avalanche method saves $7,000 to $12,000 compared to the snowball. Your feelings prefer the snowball. Your net worth prefers the avalanche. I should be honest. Human behavior is messier than spreadsheets. If the snowball gets you moving, it wins. The best strategy is the one you execute. David Bach made a career telling you to skip the latte. $5 a day, $1,800 a year, invest it and you'll be rich. The latte factor isn't wrong, it's irrelevant. The BLS Consumer Expenditure Survey, housing, transportation, and food consume roughly 65 to 70% of spending. Your coffee is a rounding error. Housing consumes 33% of median income. A family earning $70,000 spends $23,100 a year on shelter. Cut that by 15%. Smaller apartment, different neighborhood, a roommate for 2 years. You free $3,465 annually, more than every latte you've ever bought. The average new car payment is $738 per month. Let me show you what that number costs over a career. $738 invested monthly at 8% for 30 years produces $1.1 million. The gap between a new car and a used one is $1 million. That's not an exaggeration. That's compound interest doing what it does. Silently, relentlessly. Average household food spending, $9,300 a year. 54% of that, just over $5,000, is dining out and delivery. Cook 80% of meals at home. The bill drops to around $6,200. You save $3,100. Not austerity. Arithmetic. Optimize all three, housing, transportation, food, and you free $10,000 to $15,000 a year, without touching your lifestyle. Deployed into index funds at 8% over 25 years. That's $790,000 to $1.19 million. You don't need a higher salary. You need different allocation, same asymmetry, small discomfort now, enormous freedom later. The equation never changes, only the inputs. Thomas Stanley spent 30 years studying millionaires. His book, The Millionaire Next Door. The median millionaire drives a 4-year-old car, never spent more than $41,000 on a vehicle. That's the statistical portrait of American wealth. The person you're trying to impress at the traffic light is probably in more debt than you. You're performing for an audience that can't afford the show. Festinger's social comparison theory explains why. We don't evaluate ourselves in absolute terms, we benchmark against peers. In the age of Instagram, your peer group includes people who lease luxury for content. You're comparing your savings to someone else's credit line. A definition no luxury brand will ever use. Wealth is what you don't see. The car not bought, the renovation not done, the vacation not taken. Rich is a current income. Wealthy is a future option. They're not the same word. I've watched families earn $300,000 and panic when the furnace breaks. I've watched a retired teacher with $2 million clip coupons. Not because she has to, because discipline doesn't have an off switch. Wealth whispers. Poverty is loud. The asymmetry one last time. The status signal feels good for a moment. The portfolio grows for a lifetime. Ronald Read died at 92. His portfolio was 60 years of standing orders. 60 years of not upgrading. 60 years of treating capital deployment as the first bill, not the last. He didn't beat the market. He just stayed in it. That's the entire practice. There is no other one. Contain your lifestyle when income rises. Deploy savings into investments, knowing the ride will be rough. Architect your debt or it architects your poverty. Optimize the big three, not the small indulgences. And stop signaling wealth you don't have to people who don't care. The 10% who build wealth don't love money more than you. They understand something simple. Money is stored time. Every dollar spent is a future hour you'll work. Every dollar invested is a future hour you won't have to. None of this is financial advice. Past returns don't guarantee future performance. The principles are timeless. The numbers will vary. The question isn't how to get rich. The question is, what do you want your 60-year-old self to be doing on a Tuesday? The math is patient. It's been waiting for you to start. This is The Quiet Wealth. If the mathematics of patience interest you, subscribe. We don't publish often. When we do, it's because the arithmetic is worth your time. Next, the one investment strategy that outperforms 92% of professional fund managers, and why they'll never admit it.